Hi, my name is Larken Rose, and I may soon be a terrorist. I'm not kidding, and I'm not exaggerating. So if you know anybody in law enforcement, quick, run and tell them to watch this video. But tell them to watch the whole thing and before they go and drone my house or anything. Now, those who know me know that for many years now I've been a very vocal advocate of the non-aggression principle. The idea that it's never okay to initiate violence, that the only time it's okay to use physical force against another human being is in defense, to defend yourself against somebody else committing aggression. Attacking is bad, defending is good. It's not exactly a very complicated concept. It's basically the basis of being a moral person, and the basis of civilization is we don't attack and rob each other. So, why would I say that I may soon be a terrorist? And again, I'm not kidding about that. How could a terrorist possibly be for the non-aggression principle? Is it that I'm about to give up the non-aggression principle and go and threaten and blow up innocent people? No, it's not. But how could somebody who's against the initiation of violence be a terrorist? Well, if the concept in your mind of what a terrorist is somebody who threatens and harms innocent people to serve some agenda, I've never been that and never will be that. However, that's not what the term technically means. But let me back up a bit first and talk about the fact that I'm a criminal. And so are you, whether you know it or not. Now, the term crime, the control freaks who call themselves government and refer to themselves as lawmakers and pass legislation, yeah, sometimes they pass laws against the kind of crimes that have victims, murder and theft and assault and fraud and things like that. Now, I don't violate those laws. It's not because politicians told me not to do those things, it's because those things are bad. Those things violate the non-aggression principle, which is why I don't do them. However, there's a myriad of other just stupid, arbitrary garbage that the politicians have deemed law, have enacted into legislation, and by their terminology, the way they define it, disobeying any one of them is breaking the law or committing a crime, which I do all the time, and I don't have the slightest bit of shame or guilt about it. Now, I would if I was hurting somebody else. I would feel shame or guilt about that, but I don't do those things because they're wrong. Now, in addition to intentionally, knowingly violating a bunch of so-called laws, politician scribbles, I'm sure I violate a bunch that I don't even know about. And so do you. If you don't think you're a criminal, it's only because you don't understand the legal system. The number of arbitrary laws is just amazing. And to feel guilty about disobeying some arbitrary, pointless, stupid thing, and by doing something that doesn't hurt anybody, that's no reason to feel guilt or shame. So I don't at all mind being a criminal, and you're a criminal too, whether you know it or not. But there's a difference between a criminal and a terrorist. Being a criminal doesn't make you a terrorist. So why do I say I may soon be a terrorist? Now, anything can be made into law, can be enacted as legislation. There is nothing so horrible and evil and destructive that it can't be legislated, or that it hasn't already been legislated. In this country, slavery used to be the law. Assaulting and forcibly evicting and murdering the people who lived here before Whitey showed up was the law. Lots of evil, nasty things have been the law in this country and around the world. You know, the Soviet Russia and Red China and Nazi Germany, most of what they did, they first enacted as law. And when they carried it out, it was law enforcers carrying it out. And so first, let's be clear of what the law is, because people have this vague notion in their head that it's some magical rules that we all have to live by to be civilized. No, most of the time it's arbitrary garbage that the politicians spew out that we have no moral obligation to obey. However, like I said, there's a difference between being a criminal and being a terrorist. I'm already a criminal. I may soon be a terrorist. And here's why. There are lots of things that the U.S. control freaks are now talking about, and things they've already done, like gun confiscation, which for years and years people said, oh, they would never ever do that. And then after Hurricane Katrina, fascists were going door to door, stealing people's guns. And there are a bunch of emergency measures that if they declare an emergency, they can just seize stuff and steal food and water and whatever else they decide, and declare it to be law, despite the fact that they just made up that power. It's not in the Constitution, it's not moral, it's not anything. So they have all these things, and indefinite detention is a big one. Well, we decided we don't really like you, so we're going to lock you up forever without charging you with anything or putting you on trial or anything. We'll just put you in a cage, maybe for the rest of your life. That's indefinite detention. Bush and Obama think that's just fine. And now they think it's just fine to murder anyone that they want to label an enemy combatant. And they don't have to prove anything. You don't get a day in court. They don't have to go to the public and say, here's what he did. You know, they may do some spin. All they have to do is say, you're an enemy combatant, now we can kill you. So, given the things that the control freaks are talking about doing, I may soon be a terrorist. And here's why. The definition of terrorism is not just hurting innocent people to serve some agenda. If it was that, I will never be that. I won't hurt innocent people. The legal definition, the technical definition of terrorism includes using violence or threats of violence to try to persuade a people or a government to change their policies. Trying to influence government policy by threats of violence. And so, let's say they tried to do a gun confiscation again somewhere, like they did after Katrina. And a couple people said, oh, they're coming door to door. And the couple people wait at their door and they say, hey, fascists, we see you there, go away or we're going to shoot you. Ta-da! Those guys are terrorists. They threatened violence in an attempt to influence the policy of a government, the policy of randomly disarming people. If the government says, we're going to seize all the food because this is an emergency, and somebody says, you're not seizing mine, this is what my family needs to stay alive, ta-da, he's a terrorist. So, because law can be aggressive, it can be completely tyrannical, completely oppressive, it can be anything. It can be as nasty and vicious and immoral as you can possibly imagine. Because forcibly resisting that counts as crime, and counts as terrorism if your goal is to change public policy, everybody with a spine, at one point or another, may be stuck in a situation where his choices are be a complete freaking coward or be a terrorist. Either let the people in government do anything they damn well please to you, or technically be a terrorist for forcibly resisting government aggression, because that's going to fit within the definition. Using force to try to influence government policy, that's in their definition of terrorism. So there are definitely things that the federal government and state governments have threatened to do and have already done in some places that I would forcibly resist. If they try to randomly disarm people, I will forcibly resist, and I'll probably get together with other people who plan on forcibly resisting. In other words, we will use the threat of violence or violence to try to stop that government policy from being implemented. Same thing if they go complete police state socialism and say, we get all the food, we control all the water, and do that thing. If I have food for my family and they come get it, I'm going to forcibly resist them. And I'm going to join together with others if that works better, which it usually does. And that's why I say I may soon be a terrorist, because the fascists in D.C. are talking about things that I think people should totally forcibly resist. And start by mere threats, telling them, if you come do this, we will violently resist. But even that fits the definition of terrorism, the threat of using force to influence a government. So again, there will come a time when you probably have a choice between being a complete coward and being a terrorist. Because when tyranny steps over that line, if you have a line anywhere, and I don't care if your line matches mine, if you have a line anywhere, if you don't, you're just going to let them do anything they want and you're just a spineless coward. But if there's some line somewhere where you say, no, that I will not allow, you're going to be a terrorist too. If you forcibly resist law enforcement, and they can call anything they want law, and so call anything they want crime and terrorism if you forcibly resist. So someday you may be a terrorist too, so get used to the idea, because In any country where it's approaching totalitarianism, there comes a line where every individual has to choose between being a worthless coward and a terrorist. So you might have to make that choice pretty soon, and I know which choice I'm going to make. Now the funny thing is their definition of terrorism includes subnational groups in the definition, because that's the only way they could write a definition which didn't describe everything the United States government does. I mean, the IRS, does anybody not know that they terrorize the public to serve a political agenda, to get people to send in money? Everybody knows that. There's no way you could define terrorism to exclude that without saying, this definition doesn't apply to us in government. So they did that in the definition. They just exempted themselves because what they do all the time is intimidate and terrorize and use force against people to serve an agenda. But back to defensive force being called terrorism. And, you know, keep in mind, in this country, slavery used to be legal. And attacking and forcibly evicting and killing the natives who lived here before used to be legal. And if anybody resisted that, like the Underground Railroad who snuck slaves out of the South, if at any point, I'm sure this happened, if at any point they said, you know, if the cops show up, we're going to knock them out, poof, they're planning to use violence to influence public policy, which means they would be terrorists. And if you look through history, there's a heck of a lot of good people who totally fit into the definition of terrorists. You know, the people who resisted the thuggery and the evil and the oppression of Red China and the Soviet Union, anybody who even threatened to forcibly resist was, under this definition, a terrorist. I mean, the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto who said, we don't want to get on the cattle cars, and shot back at the SS, the Nazi fascists and the local police helping them, they were totally terrorists under this definition, under the current definition in this country of terrorism. It's the illegal use of violence to influence government policy. And there's a lot of other examples we could use in this country. The Boston Tea Party, where they got on boats and threw tea in to protest a tax. Obviously their goal was get rid of this tax, and their means was force and vandalism. They were terrorists. The Founding Fathers were just about all terrorists. Now I'm making this video on July 4th, and that's not a coincidence, because everybody's out there rah 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 waving their flags, hooray for American independence. Those who know me can probably guess the last example I'm going to give of terrorists, which is the Founding Fathers, the people who started this country. Because obviously, clearly, indisputably, they used violence and the threat of violence to alter government policy. Namely, they told King George, we don't answer to you anymore, get lost, and if you try to forcibly subjugate us, we will violently resist. So, anybody who was shocked by me saying I may soon be a terrorist, if government tries to step over one of these lines that I'm just not going to go along with, that I will forcibly resist, and lots of other people will forcibly resist. Anybody who was shocked that I said I may soon be a terrorist, I want to wish you a happy National Terrorist Day, where we all celebrate what a bunch of terrorists did in 1776, using the threat of violence to try to influence government policy.